Hey there, fellow meatbags, and welcome back to another video with me, the Black Swan Atheist, and we're going to do another Questions for Atheists videos. Now, the video that we're doing today, it's only like 6 minutes long. I think it's 3 or 4 questions, not a big chunk, and I haven't watched through the whole thing. I watched a little bit, saw what his first question was, and figured we'll give it a try, all right? So, come with me on this journey, all right?
What's up? Eddie Williams here.
Hey, Eddie.
Atheism is something that's been on my mind lately.
Really?
And if you live in a big city, it's.
I don't live in a big city.
There's lots of people.
It's pretty common outside the city too. I mean, with the internet, it's pretty common everywhere.
God, that are seeking God, that maybe haven't heard of God, and so.
Oh, I've heard of God.
I want to arm you with a few things to talk to them about. Because
sorry about the pixelation when I pause and unpause the video. It's kind of weird, but there it is.
A lot of the times when we get in conversations with atheists or agnostics, Christians are on the defensive.
Really? I wonder why that is.
We believe in an objective morality. We believe in a God.
But how does believing in an objective morality put you on the defensive? I mean, it's potentially a claim that you have to defend, but that's not the same thing as being on the defensive, I don't think.
That says right and wrong, and they want to ask us questions, but oftentimes atheists in particular have lots of questions that remain unanswered themselves.
We do sometimes,
so what
yep.
I want to arm you to do today is to begin to ask them questions and
I like it.
to get them to think and ponder over their own thought
I like it. Thinking is important, pondering is important, deeply considering things is important, and conversations are important.
So here are 4 questions that you can ask your atheist friend.
You got it.
1. Where does objective morality come from?
Right out of the gate. This assumes, maybe he's going to talk about some more. I haven't listened any further than this. This assumes there is objective morality. I don't entirely think there is. I've talked about this before, I'm sure, and I'll talk about it again. But I tend to agree with the type of framework that Matt Dillahunty talks about, where we can make objective assessments about moral questions within a moral framework. And that's not the same as objective morality in the sense that I think he is using it, which is to say some existent entity that exists outside of the processes of thinking agents. Like gravity is an objective force. I don't think morality exists in that way. So to ask about where objective morality comes from, I don't think it exists, but let's listen on.
Or does it exist at all?
He did ask that.
That are atheists, they're probably pretty good people, right? They pay their bills on time.
I try. Haven't always.
They use
mostly.
The signal. They do all of
yes. Despite living in Rhode Island, I do actually use my turn signal.
They check all the boxes that would say, yes, I'm a good person. I would ask them.
I like to think I'm a good person. Not perfect by any stretch.
Why do they do what they do? Why do they obey these laws? If we're just all cells that have evolved over millions and millions of years, then what's the point? What's the purpose? Is there purpose at all? And
okay, now he's added another question here about purpose, which is different than the question of morality. It's a complicated situation. It's a complicated question, morality. It's a very complicated collection of social behaviors and ideas and mores, so it's hard to digest and simplify. The essence of it is we are a social species, and that being a social species provided a survival advantage to our species and to the species that preceded us as we evolved up. And having structured, ordered societies allows us to behave more cooperatively, lending a survival advantage. So we have evolved this capacity for morality, which includes empathy and reciprocity and a whole host of other ideas and thoughts. So the question about why we do it, we are biologically engineered to do it. That's why we care about these things. In fact, when we see an individual of the species that doesn't care about these things, we identify them as a sociopath or a psychopath, someone that's dysfunctional or not of the norm. And we hopefully try to bring them to a place where they understand why these things are important to the rest of us. But basically, it's an evolutionary trait. That's why we do these things. As far as for me individually, why do I do these things? I have empathy for other people. I don't want to put other people in pain or discomfort or do harm to them because I know how it feels. I do not want to live in a society where things like murder, rape, and theft are considered moral or justified, because that makes for a terrible society, and I could be on the receiving end of those things. There's a whole host of different reasons why I choose to behave morally, including occasionally fear of punishment. Part of why I don't speed more than I do when I'm driving to work is I'm afraid of getting pulled over and getting a ticket, which would make a bad day for me and raise my insurance. So there's a certain amount of fear of repercussions for taking immoral actions and behaving in immoral ways. I don't want to end up in jail. I tend to doubt there's anything I don't do out of fear of going to jail that I would do if that threat wasn't there. But it's possible you could think of something. I don't know. So there's a lot of different reasons why I behave in a moral way. And why do I have these moral inclinations to begin with? I'm genetically engineered to be that way.
If there is purpose, then what's the objective standard for that purpose? And what I mean by that is, where is the ultimate moral law coming from? If it doesn't come from God, where does...
Right, I feel like really mixing up the ideas of purpose, like a purpose to morality. The purpose to morality, I suppose if you want to say this at all, is going back to our genetic engineering. I mean, I use that term figuratively, just so you know. I don't think somebody engineered us, but it's an evolutionary trait. It contained a survival, it promoted a survival advantage. So the individuals that exhibited stronger moral behavior were selected for by natural selection and other processes that brought us to where we are now. So that would be the purpose. And you can see this, as I've mentioned before in other videos, in animals, especially other primates and in dogs. They show proto-ethics, proto-morality in these sociological behaviors. Primates especially have been demonstrated they have ideas of fairness, of compassion, of giving to others, even at an expense to themselves. So you can see these sort of things in animals that are not as fully developed as humans are cognitively.
Come from? Does it come from the universe? Does it come from our own thinking? Is it all subjective? Is there no law? And if that is the case, then why do we obey our worldly laws? What's the point of not murdering or not stealing? What's the point of that? And so these are questions that have to be answered.
I think I answered all of those questions pretty fully.
Question number 2: how do we get energy out of non-energy? This is an important one.
We don't. I don't know where he's going to go with this, but this is a nonsensical question.
You hear scientists talk a lot about the Big Bang and how the Big Bang kind of started forth in motion everything in the universe. But where did this original matter come from?
Okay, I kind of figured that's where he'd be going with this. I am not a physicist, an astrophysicist, or a cosmologist, to make that clear. My best understanding of the Big Bang is that it is the initial, early, rapid inflation of the universe, the physical universe that we experience. It's where there was no time preceding, because time and space are intertwined, like electricity and magnetism are intertwined. So space and time all came into existence at the first moment of the Big Bang. What preceded that moment, if that question is even coherent, and it might not be, is currently unknown and currently unknowable. There are physicists working on ideas, theoretical physicists working on ideas, but we just don't know. That doesn't mean it came from nothing. That doesn't mean as an atheist, I'm claiming that it came from nothing. And it's important to note that this is irrelevant to the question of atheism. which is specifically about whether or not a God exists. How the universe came to be is an entirely separate question. The fact of the matter is, we don't know. I'm fond of the notion that there is a multiverse, and that beyond the bounds of our universe, if it has bounds, is essentially a vast area of quantum energy, and that fluctuations in that quantum energy occasionally result in universes like ours. It's as good an idea of any. As Vice Rhino likes to say, if there needs to be something eternally existent, why not energy? It makes sense to me. Again, I'm not a physicist. But the real direct answer is we don't know what caused the Big Bang or how the universe came into existence, and right now we can't know.
From where did this original energy come from to be able to build up and then shoot across the universe? Where does this come from? We believe it's God as Christians, and even the people of other faiths, they believe it's God, that God is the originator, God's eternal, that he began all of this. But for the atheists, they don't have that reference point. So where did this come from? Is this just some sort of random thing that happened?
It might be. And it's worth noting here, God done it isn't really an answer, and honestly, it's a blatant God of the gaps. I mean, this is a gap in our knowledge. Demonstrably, it's a gap in our knowledge. Saying that God did it is no different than saying God is responsible for hurling lightning bolts. It's exactly the same argument, just on a grander scale.
And if it is, how did that energy begin in the first place? Where is that potential energy coming from? How was it created?
It might have always existed. It might not have formed. It might just have always existed.
All questions that need to be asked. The third question I'd ask is, where does transcendent emotion come from?
The hell is a transcendent emotion?
Now, this is a more of a subjective question, but think about ideas like love and hate and joy. Where do these emotions come from?
Chemical processes in our brains. Again, having these emotions would drive us to take actions that have a survival advantage. I mean, pleasure is generally preferable to pain, so eating is a pleasurable experience, and we need to eat to survive. If eating was an unpleasurable experience, people wouldn't do it. And we see this happening when people have something biologically that goes wrong with them that makes eating an unpleasant experience. They stop doing it and they can waste away. All of these emotions are result of biochemical, bioelectrical, chemical processes going on upstairs in the meat between your ears.
They play some sort of social utility. Is that?
They absolutely have social utility.
The reason why we have love and why we have hate and why we have joy.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Emotions like frustration. Where do these things come from?
Ooh, frustration is a good one. Douglas Adams worked this out. It prevents boredom. Look up the robot that likes salmon. I think it's salmon, like salmon sandwiches or something. Look it up. It's Douglas Adams. It's very, very good.
Oftentimes you'll find that your atheist friend, they have people they love. They love their mom, they love their husband, they love their wife, whatever it is. They love these people. Why do they love them? And oftentimes the answer you'll get is, well, it's social utility. See, if I didn't love my spouse, then I couldn't pass off my genetic offspring, and so on and so forth. But I'd ask, why do we love other things? Why do we love people that have passed away? And there's no social utility in loving.
There is social utility in that. But also, our cognitive processes are imperfect. Emotional states can be stimulated by, I hate to say non-real, but non-literal, non-concrete phenomena. This is why you can watch a movie or listen to music or read a book and have an emotional response to that. This is why music triggers certain chemical processes in our brains through that biomechanical stimulation, and we have an emotional response to that music. Sometimes positive, sometimes sad, sometimes energizing, sometimes pacifying. I don't know exactly why these things had a survival advantage to them. I'm not a biologist. I'm not sure all our biologists know all of why these things developed the way that they did. But obviously there was some advantage to it. So he's saying social utilitarianism. It's more than social utilitarianism. That's one component of biological utilitarianism, which is part of natural selection.
Someone who's dead, what's the social utility? And really loving pizza or loving ballet, what's the social utility in that? So we do have these emotions, and they do need explanation, because if we are just stardust and we are just cells,
we are stardust,
bumping into one another, evolving over the millions and millions of years, then there has to be some sort of answer from the atheist perspective of why we do these things. And if maybe there is no answer, then I would submit to the atheist and say, well, there's no reason for you to love anything.
That's absolute nonsense. We have these emotions because we are biologically engineered, biologically developed to have them. Just because we don't know the reason for why they're there doesn't mean we don't still feel them and exercise them. That's just because you don't know the why of something doesn't mean you don't still do it or you don't still have it. Like, for a long time, there's bits of genetic code in us we don't know why they exist. For a long time, the appendix was completely ununderstood. It still probably isn't entirely understood. There's all sorts of things going on with this meat machine that we don't understand. That doesn't mean we don't feel them. It doesn't mean we don't still need them or use them. It's just, that is a fallacious line of thinking. To say that just because I don't understand why I feel love for something means that I have no reason to love it. The reason is because this is how my body functions.
Lastly, and I get a little more personal with this question.
Let's get personal.
If there is no God, does your life have meaning? I just posed that. Does your...
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. My life has more meaning now than it did when I was a Christian. It is richer, it is fuller, it is more rewarding, and it is infinitely more precious.
Life have meaning. So is there things you're passionate about? Are there love?
Firefly. I'm passionate about Firefly.
It's like art or science, things that you really, really care about. Are there acts of charity or passion projects that you're involved with? And if so, why? Why do you...
Again, this is a very broad question. Why? And he's giving a whole group. There's all sorts of reasons. I'm passionate and involved in things sometimes because they give me pleasure. Sometimes because it gives me pleasure to help a community. Sometimes because I feel like it's edifying my life. There's all kinds of reasons. It's a very hard question to give like one simple answer to, because the diversity of things that he's asking about are complex and varied.
You support the homeless efforts in your city. Why do
to
you
live
care
in a
about
city?
The refugee crisis?
Care very much.
Why do you recycle? Why?
I care about the refugee crisis because I'm empathetic towards other people, and this particularly kind of sticks in my craw right now. Not necessarily from him, because I don't know where he stands on certain things, but with the refugees coming in from Afghanistan after the U.S. military pulled out and their government collapsed, there was, 140,000 refugees, something like that, and Christian social media was full of people screaming and railing against letting these refugees into our country. These are people that have worked with us, that have helped with us, that are fleeing for their lives, that are abandoning their country and their homes with virtually nothing. And they need safe haven and they need safe harbor. And it was the Christian community that was pushing to not let them in, to demonize them, to vilify them. Pictures of the C-130s with just the cargo floor covered with people. And the caption, "Would you want this plane landing in your neighborhood?" Yes, would love to have that plane landing in my town. Not that we have an airport that could handle it, but there's one close by. I would love to let those people into my neighborhood. They need care and attention, not rejection because they're dirty Afghans. It is the most unbelievably hypocritical thing coming from Christians. It really is. And again, I don't know if this guy was against that or anything, so I'm not pointing aspersions at him directly. But, I mean, talk about hypocrisy.
Why do you care if a dog is abused in a family? Why do you support rescue animal shelters? What is the purpose behind all of these things? If we are...
Again, largely because we are empathetic creatures. We recognize when other thinking agents are suffering. We understand how that feels, and therefore we don't want to see that happening to them. This is how empathetic creatures work. And again, you see empathy in all sorts of mammalian species. I don't know if we see it outside of mammalian species or not. There are no fly diplomats after all.
We're all just cells that have evolved over time, and we all eventually...
See, this is this fallacious argument about constituent elements for some reason taking away from what the thing actually is. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's like saying, well, a book, your Bible, is just ink on paper. It's just molecules, right? It's just atoms. It's old wood pulp and ground up whatever is in carbon, whatever is in the ink that's on it. So why does it mean anything to you? It's nothing, right? I don't see why any of it in it, anything that's written in it, could possibly have any meaning to you, because it's just atoms in certain orders. It's a ridiculous kind of position to take.
Actually will die and return to the earth and to give nutrients to the ground, and so that the circle of life will continue, or something like that.
It will.
Lion King. If that's the case, then
or from Carl Sagan.
About marginalized people, why do we care if?
Again, empathy and the brevity of life. Honestly, definitely listen to Apologia about some of this stuff, or Paul Enns. He's talked about it in some interviews as himself, not necessarily on his channel, but how much more valuable life became to him after he stopped being a Christian and when he was diagnosed with potentially terminal cancer. Suddenly, life was so much more valuable, and that's the thing that I think Christians don't get. A finite life is so much more valuable than the idea of an infinite life. All we have, all the time we have, is the here and now on this planet. That makes it incredibly valuable.
If a homeless person goes hungry, why do we care if a child starves or if someone's molested or raped? Why does that touch us at our very core? Ultimately, if we're the atheists, we should believe in Charles Darwin's theory and that the...
Oh, don't go to Darwin. He's going to say survival of the fittest, isn't he? He's going to say survival of the fittest, isn't he?
Survival of the fittest, right?
Called it. And for the record, I did not watch this video beforehand. Social Darwinism has nothing to do with Darwin's theory of evolution. Survival of the fittest does not mean what you think it means as you're using it here. It means survival of the species that are best suited for their environment, the most fit for their environment. It's not nature red in tooth and claw.
Stronger eat the weak. What's wrong with...
That's... Oh... Even survival of the fittest doesn't necessarily imply that the strong are always going to eat the weak. Think about symbiotic species like the lampreys. I think it's the lampreys, right? And the sharks. They'll go around cleaning over the sharks. The shark could eat them in a heartbeat, but the shark benefits from keeping this weaker animal around. So even in that framework, it's not just the strong eat the weak.
Yeah, what's wrong with...
And for that matter, if you think about it, if you think about like cats or dogs, where you often have social structures with an alpha male and other males underneath it, the alpha male isn't just going to kill the other males. The whole pack survives as a whole. The alpha male may be the leader, but it has utility in keeping the other members of the pack alive because they help the whole pack survive.
Great countries destroying and ransacking smaller countries. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with husbands beating their weak wives? What's wrong with that? You tell me. And these are all questions that atheists need to answer. We often get the burden for these. We often have to explain our God and our perspective. You know, sometimes atheists or agnostics, they're just really angry at the idea of God or God.
Oh, no. No. We are not angry at God. We don't think God exists. We're not angry at the idea of God. Many of us were active in church before we left the faith. It has nothing to do with being hurt, being angry, wanting to sin, or any other nonsense like that. Although, as I'm thinking about it, I just want to say I appreciate in that whole morality discussion, he didn't bring up the Nazis. So, good thumbs up for that, man.
Himself. They see the pain, they see the suffering, they see the evil in the world, and they just don't know what to make of it. And they think God can't exist in a world that these evil things exist in. And I totally understand that.
This is, of course, the argument for morality, and it applies specifically to the Christian God, or God with those parameters. And the point is the idea of the triomni God, omnipotent, not omnipotent, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omniscient, is incoherent with the idea of evil existing.
But on the other side of the perspective, you've got people that are just militant, that just really hate God, that they don't love God, that they don't like anything to do with God. They hate religion in any capacity.
There are people like this. It is, in my experience, not the majority. With a fine exception to that, there are people that do hate religion, and for very understandable reasons, because it's a very destructive force in many ways in our society. I'm not entirely on board with the whole all religion is evil kind of thing, but it's very understandable why people are very opposed to religion as a rule.
They just want to see it crushed. But in either case, these questions do need to be answered, because this is going to allow somebody who's an atheist or an agnostic to help wrestle with these ideas in their mind, and they're going to have to come to grips
Not
with
so much wrestling.
these things, whether or not they're...
I have wrestled a lot with the question of morality. I should take that back. Before your video, my friend, coming out of a Protestant Christian background and becoming an atheist, you are suddenly left in a place where the foundation of morals and moralities is gone. And that is one of the big questions that I have wrestled with over time. But not really the way this guy's presenting it.
True, either from their perspective or maybe come alongside to the religious perspective. Hey, I hope this video helps a little bit in dealing.
It's been nice chatting with you. Yeah.
And people that are agnostics. Check out the questions below and read through the synopsis, and I'm going to put some book recommendations for you guys as well.
I'm good.
Through
I've read a lot of the book stuffs already.
And talking to your friends about it.
Books about wrestling with the topic of atheism. That should be interesting. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and coming on this little questions for atheists journey with me. I probably will do some more of these. It's kind of fun. They're unscripted. I'm kind of doing them off the cuff. So a lot of the emotions you're seeing are real and in the moment and in immediate. As always, be kind to one another, and I'll see you next time.